Hi, I'm Will from London, and I've been a San Lorenzo fan for about 7 or 8 years now. I started a Facebook group called San Lorenzo English, and I've got a Twitter handle which is the same, or it's specifically Cuervo Inglés, which means English crow. Los Cuervos are San Lorenzo fans, and yeah, kind of got a small Twitter community around that, and that's kind of my main way of interacting with other fans these days, and yeah, supporting them from afar.
Hi, Will. How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad you made the time for this.
No, thank you. I mean, I love talking about football, and I definitely love talking about San Lorenzo. So any excuse, to be honest.
The work that you've been doing, I'm really interested in that. But before that, the main question for this podcast: how and why San Lorenzo?
San Lorenzo for me started about 7 or 8 years ago. I was living in London. I was quite young, lived with my parents. So I had a bit of money to save up and think about living in another city and maybe starting to learn Spanish. And then I kind of started being drawn to South America. That kind of closed in Argentina when I learned about its culture, which seemed fantastic. A massive part of that is an absolute fanatism and a hysteria around football. So then I started reading about the clubs, and obviously everyone knows kind of Boca Juniors and River Plate, and I'm not usually one to go for the biggest clubs, probably because I'm a Charlton fan here in the UK, so they're a bit smaller. I like the underdogs. Then I started reading about San Lorenzo, who had this incredible support, a very interesting story, which kind of had a lot of parallels with the history of Charlton. And yeah, then I moved there for about 6 months to Buenos Aires in 2014, started going to games regularly, and from there it was just a total kind of addiction. I felt like a 5-year-old when you first see football for the first time. You just want to buy the shirts and absorb as much of it as possible and learn the chants. It was crazy, and it's just kind of all started from there, really.
Two big fans that keep getting mentioned. One is the Pope, and the the other is Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah, quite a diverse little selection. They always come up, and yeah, by all accounts, they seem very kind of legitimate fans. I mean, I'm not sure if the Pope is allowed to watch television, so maybe his is more of a just hear the scores kind of relationship with the club. But Viggo Mortensen seems very keen, and often he'll turn up on the red carpet to film premieres with like a little San Lorenzo badge or some kind of red and blue, the club colours like lining in his waistcoat and stuff like that. So yeah, proper Cuervos.
I think in one of those clips that you sent me, Jonathan Wilson was talking about how the Pope he flashes the score from the back of the Pope movie.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
been a few of those as well. And often there'll be kind of like when people come and see him in public, there's always like an Argentine in the crowd with the San Lorenzo connection, or like shout the latest score at him, give like a Vamos San Lorenzo or something like that, and he'll always respond, and it's great. I mean, you can't have much of a kind of a better representative of your club than one of the most powerful religious figures in the world. It's quite a funny one.
So that trip that you went on, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so that was, yeah, it's quite a casual thing really, just to kind of I was working a little bit as an intern for a company, but it's kind of just mainly to learn Spanish and just enjoy kind of living in a different city for about 6 months. But then the kind of San Lorenzo element of that completely took hold, um, because you start going, I mean, it's quite absorbing just reading about the club, and you get
Mm.
sucked into those YouTube videos which get shared a lot on Facebook and Twitter of just like classic Argentine supporters going mad, but with loads of kind of rhythm and melody and soul, which some maybe you don't see as much in maybe like Eastern Europe or Turkey or North Africa, which are crazy, but it's almost it's quite brutish and
Yeah.
loud and fierce.
Tribal.
Argentina's got this almost like, yeah, exactly. Argentina's got this odd kind of melody and it's almost like spiritualness about it, which I find interesting. And San Lorenzo are known for being at kind of the heart of that. They're known as the main kind of creators of the songs. Often, like the first time you hear the songs that spread around Argentina and South America, the first time is in San Lorenzo. Um, and so you're going to the game for the first time, and I was watching the game as kind of taking place in front of me, slightly to the left. I was at the edge of the stand, and then the main San Lorenzo, the Popular, which is like the kind of ultras stand behind the goal to my right. And I was probably spending more time looking to the right at the fans than I was at the game, because they're jumping up and down. They've got the all like just flags draped absolutely everywhere. There's flares going off. There's drums. There's a whole band. It's insane. And like I said, it's very kind of melodic and tuneful as well. It's almost like being at a gig, like a concert. It was mad. So yeah, once I went once, I knew this had to be like a regular thing. And then I started to meet kind of people in that process. I was a bit fascinated, like, why is this English guy supporting San Lorenzo and going to the games? But it was a great thing, and it just kind of grew from there, really.
So how open were they to you coming in? And
to be honest, very, because there's times I'm a little bit cautious because of the English-Argentine rivalry, which is definitely stronger from an Argentine point of view than English point of view. They talk about the Falklands, Las Malvinas, the islands, because of the war in the 80s all the time. Is a horrific kind of episode for Argentina. And then there's obviously a massive football rivalry that's kind of related to that as well. So I was a bit cautious, but I think I was always very invested in the club and interested and curious, and maybe they recognized that I was kind of that kind of innocent curiosity, and always just took me in, and they're just kind of fascinated with the fact that this gringo white guy hadn't gone to like Boca and River like every other kind of tourist in the city, and he was supporting San Lorenzo. It was kind of a novelty thing, and always like so welcoming. And yeah, you do feel, it's cliche stuff, oh, you feel part of a family, but I absolutely did. And in a city where you can feel quite foreign, where the foreign people are a bit separate from the Argentine locals, it made you feel part of a community and a family. And yeah, it's probably the best part of it, to be honest.
how did the Twitter handle start?
The Twitter handle came back. So I came back from Argentina after 6 months after that initial first trip. And I had all this kind of interest and energy around San Lorenzo, streaming all the games. And then you hit full time and you're like, I don't know what to do. I had no one to talk about it with, because I didn't have many close friends with San Lorenzo at the time. I didn't speak great Spanish after my first trip, so that barrier was there as well. And so I was like, I'll set up a Facebook group. I'll just do little match summaries. If like 10 of my friends who are kind of semi-interested follow it, and then maybe a handful of Argentines who know English can follow it, of just kind of a weird curiosity, then that's fine for me. And I can just discuss things, do little news updates and little match reports and whatever. And it started from that. And yeah, so I think that went up to about 2,000 on Facebook, but then I stopped using Facebook, and Twitter seemed a more natural home. And yeah, I'm kind of more active on there now. It's kind of fits and starts, because I think as I've gone on longer, it's less relying on social media for all my San Lorenzo interactions like it used to be. And I've got like so 3 or 4 very close friends who are big San Lorenzo fans, so you can kind of like get your discussion energy out through WhatsApp and all that kind of phone calls and stuff. So yeah, but Twitter's kind of where it is now, and it's been nice. People still get kind of fascinated and get in your DMs and be like, why on earth do you support San Lorenzo if you're an Englishman from London? And it's, yeah, it always kind of sparks that curiosity.
That's how I found you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. It's good in that way. And there's actually a little sub community now of kind of specifically English speaking supporters of Argentine clubs. There's this guy, I think a lot of people just sort of find them and playing like Football Manager or something. There's a guy who supports Lanús, who are a very small club in Argentina, or pretty small club, who tweets in English about them. He's one of the originals. And then there's guys, obviously River, Boca, Racing, Independiente, and they all kind of communicate with each other. And they're very like friendly, nice guys. And it's a nice shared thing. Like you feel less alone when it's, late on a Sunday night. No one in your country, no one you really knows is live streaming, Belgrano against Tucumán in the Argentine league. But, these guys on Twitter are. So it's quite a nice little community of nerdy kind of Argentine Superliga supporters, I guess.
How are you watching the games then?
There was a fantastic thing when I first started supporting from England called Football para Todos, which is football for everyone. And it was a government-funded thing which live streamed in like HD every single game from their Premier League all over the world. So that was brilliant. Now it's a bit harder. That scheme ended, and you kind of have to go the normal way of like less reliable streaming sites. And also there's a thing called Fanatis now, which I recommend if people like South American football in kind of the States or the UK, or I think all across Europe, and it's like a little $10 a month subscription to watch the Argentine League. So I've got that now, and that's good. That's a crucial thing that kind of keeps me in touch with all the games.
What's the time difference like?
The time difference varies on English clock between 3 and 4 hours, which isn't too bad. Yeah. I know people who have it worse. I've got friends in New Zealand, for example, who are a big Arsenal fan like yourself, and yeah, here's some crazy, crazy times. The thing is, the equivalent of the Champions League in South America, the Libertadores, they play quite late over there. So that's your late shift. That's your typical like 2 or 3 a.m. on a work night, which is tough. And I had to work out the kind of Libertadores nap, which is when I go to bed at about 10, set an alarm for about 2, watch the game, and then go to bed after about 2 hours and wake up again, which is quite hard, but you've got to do it because they're the biggest games.
I was doing that, trying to watch the Europa League. It would be at
Yeah, that must be
exactly that.
tough.
Oh man, it's 1:30, and 11:30 is like a dream. If it starts at
They're the
11,
good ones.
yeah.
Yeah, it's part of your routine. No complaints. Yeah, that's tough.
2:30 is killer, and if it goes to extra time, oh fuck, then you're done for.
I know, but that's part of the community as well. It's part of all these people who support teams from a distance. The classic thing you relate to, like going into the office all kind of sleepy, semi-hungover because they've been watching obscure football the other side of the world. But it can kind of add to it. If you're doing well, if you've got a great result, I can remember a few when we've like a big Libertadores game. We beat Flamengo, who just won the Libertadores, huge club from Brazil. We beat them at the 94th minute to qualify from the group stage, and you're tearing around your house at like 3:30 a.m. Try not to wake up housemates, just like stifled cheering like that. And you're absolutely knackered. Then you can't get back to sleep because you've got the adrenaline buzz from the game, and you just get another 2 hours and you wake up. But then those days you don't mind because you've got that buzz from a few hours earlier during the night, and it's kind of the fun elements of it sometimes if you're doing well.
So tell me, who is your club legend?
San Lorenzo club legend. There's a number 10 called Pipi Romagnoli, Leandro Romagnoli. He's quite a fun legend because he's very personal to San Lorenzo. If you watch just Argentine football as a neutral, he's nowhere near as good as like a Riquelme, who's your classic number 10 hero from kind of Argentine domestic football of the last kind of 20, 30 years. He's not as big as like Independiente have exported, Aguero, Racing, another rival club, have exported, Diego Milito, who did so well at Inter. They've all got players like that who have really kind of shone. San Lorenzo haven't really got that so much. Angel Correa is doing quite well at Atleti Madrid. He was playing for San Lorenzo as a kind of 19-year-old when I first started supporting. He was brilliant. But Romagnoli is like the local club hero. He played for them, I think 2 or 3 times. He came back to us. Local guy, like a fan from when he was a child, and that means that's a very Argentine thing. I think everyone's got around the world their identification with the local club, but it's very known when it's a local guy who plays for an Argentina, and they always tend to come back. Even if like Romagnoli played for Sporting Lisbon, did quite well, but it was always going to come back. And you get these homecomings, which are great, and just kind of adds to the kind of affection and idolization, I guess, of these players. And yeah, kind of a very busy number 10, gets around the pitch, quite aggressive, heart on sleeve. If you like games where we're about to win the title in 2013, he gets subbed off in 88 minutes. He's crying as he comes off the pitch just from the nerves and the emotion. He's on the bench crying his eyes out. He scored a goal against like a local rival called Huracan in a game I just travelled over especially for in 2015, and he's like tearing off his shirt, his tattoos up his arms. He's just absolutely just like pulsing with energy, throws himself into supporters. Like he really feels like another supporter. And so yeah, he has a lot of affection among supporters, and it's very easy to kind of to like. And I've got a San Lorenzo shirt with 10 Romagnoli on the back. He's a bit of a hero.
It's always, I find that it surprises me how much loyalty means to fans. Everyone who talks about, they don't talk about the best players, they don't talk about the most talented guys. Everyone talks about that one guy and his loyalty each and every time.
It's true, isn't it? I guess that's the most relatable thing as a supporter, because seeing someone like a Riquelme, like what they do on a pitch is just astronomical. It's so far away from what you could ever seek to achieve that there's no kind of comparison. There's nothing to really relate to that closely, even though you love watching it. With a loyal player, it's the nearest you get to a fan, isn't it? He's the fan representative on the pitch. So someone who just throws themselves into the crowd when they score, like celebrates a last-minute winner like you would on the terraces. Someone who says the right things in interviews and seems kind of sincere with it, talks about the supporters, talks about a passion for the club, talks about history, identity, community, with a kind of like authority. And you think it's not just sound bites, like they mean it. fans love that. And if they keep coming back and they spend a lot of time at the club, it's, you can't help but adore them. And whether it's San Lorenzo, which obviously, even as a non-Argentine, the guys who like just keep coming back and identify with the club so closely, like they do feel like one of yours, even though they're from another country, the other side of the world. So I guess that's part of it with Romagnoli and all the players, really, I guess.
So what's your earliest memory of the club?
Earliest memory was 2013, just as I was kind of the months leading up to my trip to Argentina. So I was reading about the club, and then I discovered that Football Para Todos thing where you could watch the games free online. And I started to watch the games at home on kind of a Sunday night. And it was a great timing, because they had some terrible years. They nearly got relegated in 2011, 2012, terrible financial difficulties, a mess, absolute mess. Things can change so quickly in Argentina, though, which is kind of the beauty of it. And by 2013, they're suddenly fighting for a title. And one of the first games I watched was literally a title decider. They're playing Vélez Sarsfield, which is Mauro Zarate's club. They play in the Premier League in Serie A. And it was 0-0. If it stays 0-0, San Lorenzo are champions. They win their first title in years. And there's a bit of a rivalry between the two clubs, so a bit of extra spice there. And if Vélez score, then the title's theirs. So it's like a straight shootout. Crazy, hardly happens. And then about the 90th minute, it drops in the San Lorenzo box. Vélez player connects with like an incredible volley. It's whistling towards the top corner. And the San Lorenzo keeper, Torrico, sends up a hand and pulls off like an incredible reflex save, which is just a title-winning save. It's like the equivalent of a goal in a save just to clinch the title. And I'm watching home going, and I can't believe it. And my Spanish was non-existent at that time. I'm trying to kind of capture, all I can hear is the commentator going absolutely mental. Don't really understand his words, but I'm like, if I'm understanding this as I think it is, he's just won San Lorenzo the title, and it's kind of unfolding, and you're gathering what you can, and it was maybe the drama of that as like an early memory. The first time I really watched a proper game was kind of what hooked me in and maybe made it a kind of weird destiny. So by the time, a few months later, when I arrived to Argentina, they were champions of Argentina. And then that year they won the Libertadores, the Champions League equivalent, for the first time in their history. So I'd walked into like the best year by far in like 100 years of the history of the club. So it was great timing.
So tell me, who are their biggest rivals?
The biggest rivals would be two teams. The local team I mentioned a minute ago, which is Huracan, Hurricane, literally, which is one of the reasons why San Lorenzo's nickname is El Ciclón, the cyclone. It's like the cyclone against the hurricane. But that is the classic derby, the Clásico, and it's they call it the Clásico del Barrio, the neighborhood Clásico, because they're so close to each other in Buenos Aires, those two clubs, and you get a lot of kind of across friends and family kind of cross supporting of the two clubs. But Huracan are quite poor, and San Lorenzo are kind of like, I think, about 34 wins up in terms of their history head to head. Another thing I like about Argentina, that always counts where you are with a head to head, so you know, like, I don't know, even if you're playing for centuries and centuries, there's always a marker of kind of who's coming out on top. So that being so one-sided, a lot of San Lorenzo fans I know would take the Boca Juniors game more seriously. Boca Juniors is a big, obviously their Clásico is River, but after that it's probably San Lorenzo. And there's a weird thing, San Lorenzo is the only club in Argentina to have a better head-to-head against Boca. It's the only club to have done that. So it's a weird bogey team for Boca Juniors, and it's that's a great fixture, and they're quite easy to dislike. Boca, when you get involved with Argentine football and follow it more closely, there's something quite obnoxious about them. I guess what all the big clubs around the world have, when you've got that mass support, you get all the press attention, all that media attention, there's a kind of pompousness and arrogance. And the more you learn about Boca, when you get past the lovely kit and the lovely stadium and Maradona and Riquelme and all that, you go, these lot are horrible, and you really want to beat them. So it's a good derby.
I was watching one of those videos that you sent me, and as soon as it starts, man, I mean, it was making the hair on my arm stand. It was amazing. That must have been some experience. Yeah,
it's exactly that. It's so much more, because it's always a big part of what I love about going to watch football here. I'm a Charlton fan, and the songs and the atmosphere, is what it's all about. But it's something so different, which I mentioned earlier. There's that kind of melody and extra spiritualness. And even when you don't know the words, even if you don't speak Spanish, you go, wow, what are these guys on? Like, it's got another level and like depth to it, and which is great. And we're not talking like 2 lines that repeated, or like a little verse. Like these are full songs, like verse, chorus, but sometimes changing verses. They go on and on and on. And it's funny enough, it's one of the methods I use to learn Spanish was to find a song on YouTube. I get the same thing, and you literally got goosebumps on your arm. You see the Ken will zoom in on a fan's almost crying in the terraces, they're singing it. They throw their arms forward as they do in Argentina. They kind of flick their wrists in this weird kind of passionate gesture. And it draws you in. And then I start looking up the lyrics to the songs, which are usually somewhere on kind of social media. And I learned a lot of all my first words were just San Lorenzo, today we must win, we hate Huracan, we hate Boca, they, sucker, whatever. It was like Argentine profanity and kind of like barrio neighborhood speak were kind of all the first phrases I learned because I was learning San Lorenzo songs. And then as I went along, I'd noticed that all these songs appeared to be starting in San Lorenzo, and I wonder if it was just like a boast of like San Lorenzo. Like, oh, we invented that song, a bit like just trying to be maybe what Liverpool are over here, or Celtic, maybe those kind of clubs that are famous for it. But San Lorenzo really are, and I started digging into it, and I wrote an article for a magazine called Mundial, and you trace the origins of these songs, and it was a real San Lorenzo thing that got this creativity. And then I met this group which is kind of connected a little bit to the Barra Brava, which is the hooligans, but they're kind of more focused on the atmosphere rather than, I guess, the violence. And they were called Escuela de Tablones, which is School of the Terraces, because that was kind of a nickname given to San Lorenzo being the masters of the terrace song. And they spend half their time just like writing songs, practicing songs, getting together with their band because they've got trumpets, drums, all that kind of stuff, and making sure there's always kind of new, fresh, interesting, passionate songs coming out of San Lorenzo. And that's one of the best parts of the whole experience for sure. I mean, even the dullest games, there's always the songs coming out and the atmosphere and the drums. And about 2 hours before a game, they'll gather outside the stands with all the drums echoing through, reverberating around you, and have like kind of like a concert, just like jamming, but then like bouncing, and the group's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So then by the time it gets like 10 minutes before kickoff, that group under the stand literally starts bouncing, and they bounce all the way into the terraces and take their place at the front of the stand behind the goal, and then kind of kicks the whole stadium into life. And just weird kind of routine, this musical routine, which I was just loving. And so it's a major part of the experience when you're watching games in Argentina. Probably the best part, because the football isn't always brilliant, to be fair.
It's a bit scary when you look at it, because this whole section is just jumping, and you wonder, like, they're not sitting, and they don't seem to be sitting throughout the game, right?
Not at all, especially behind the goal, the mass kind of area, which I guess most people call like ultras area. It's pure terrace, so there's no seats anyway, and it's kind of like a smog of like marijuana in the air. Everyone's bouncing, everyone's singing, and it is, when it's jam packed, like so busy, it is sort of your first few games quite nervy, especially if you're not like you don't really know the form, you haven't been there before. I took a friend to that derby game. It was the first San Lorenzo Huracan game for like 5 years. And we got in late and we didn't really know what we were doing. So rather than kind of getting out of the way of the Barra Brava, the hooligans are going a bit further away, we just ended up walking straight into the middle of it. Yeah. So my friend's hanging on to the kind of flag kind of banner thing above him, because he literally thought the stand might give way underneath him, because it trembles. It's a huge concrete structure, but it trembles beneath you. And it's like when you're on a trampoline and sometimes you catch someone else's bounce, or someone catches yours, and you get these weird rhythms beneath you, and you can fall. And then you have avalanches where someone goes, then everyone goes, and they can be quite dangerous. But it's a lot of people, like, say, if you're just visiting Argentina for the first time, will go, don't be in the popular, don't be in that space behind the goal, because it can be quite dangerous. But once you get to know the form, it's kind of where you want to be. Like, I loved being in there. It's an absolute carnival every single game, even though it probably is a different situation in terms of health and safety standards compared to what you see over here in England. And
energy. I mean, how long can you keep doing that? Because
it's exhausting. And when you do it for the full day, which they do, it's absolutely exhausting. So I remember the first time I did that kind of full day experience was actually in Morocco, because San Lorenzo were at the Club World Cup, because the year they won the Libertadores, they went on to play the Club World Cup in Marrakesh and played Madrid in the final. And I went out there with a few English friends because it's quite ezy to get to. I was living in London at the time. And 14,000 Argentine fans traveled to Marrakesh. It's absolutely incredible, kind of using like 2-year loans, paying back in kind of installments and selling cars and houses to make it. Like, it was mad. And we met some of these guys who kind of took us under their wing for the day of the final. And the kickoff was at something like 9 p.m. and we met at like 1 p.m. and the drinking's already in full flow on the kind of the terraces of the hotels, drinking. Then a kind of like a tuk-tuk open taxi type thing to the stadium. Everyone's hanging out the back, singing, shouting. And then you get in the stadium, which they like to in Argentina, about like 2 hours before kickoff, 3 hours sometimes for a big game. And it's constant pie all the way through. And you've drunk so much, you've often smoked a lot as well. And then you're screaming and singing all the time that by the time kickoff comes, like, you're kind of knackered. But because of the buzz of the game and the extra kind of energy burst that comes through that, it kind of carries you through. But there's been a few times where I've been dead at the end of big matches. And I've been like, one time I just walked out the ground and vomited on the side of the roadside because it had been so intense and I'd drunk so much before. And I think I'd been out the night before. And then after all the bouncing and singing and shouting and drinking, I was finished. And it's a very kind of visceral, heavy experience, but that's what makes it great, to be honest. Like, I love it.
You were mentioning that they took out loans and stuff, mortgages on their houses.
Yeah, so the Argentine economy is kind of perennially in crisis, and so a trip from Buenos Aires to Marrakesh, it was something like 3 stops, and almost like a day of traveling, incredibly expensive, and people don't have that money. But the Club World Cup in South America is the biggest thing you can imagine. It's bizarre. In Europe, no one really takes it seriously. But since it used to be the Intercontinental Cup, it's their chance to kind of shine against the European big dogs. And they take it so seriously. You have 4 months of just trying teams in preparation for the Club World Cup. So the fans have the same mentality. And if they, like River did the same, they took about 15,000 to Tokyo, which is so far Japan. And yeah, people I know who just think that I have to go to this game. And I remember seeing adverts for 2-year loans where people pay back every single month for 2 years just to pay for like a flights and accommodation package to Marrakesh. And I know people who sold cars. I know people who kind of left jobs because they couldn't get the time off, but they weren't going to miss out, so they just quit. And that's the kind of hysteria you get in Argentina with their football clubs. It's incredible.
Wow. I mean, you really can't understand it. But at the same time, that passion that everyone talks about, it sets that so much into a context of what their lives are like and how much this really means to them.
It means everything. And coming from the UK, we always think, home of football. Yeah, everyone copied English support. We kind of the kind of gatekeepers of football culture, if you like, and no one's more passionate than us. And it's just nonsense. I mean, I think already Germany and France and definitely places like Algeria, Morocco, Turkey, all with much better support. South America's my favourite, and particularly Argentina. Because you've got that passion, but you've got that very kind of cultural part of it. They use really cool like rock songs and pop songs to fashion their songs, and when all that passion's going into it, it defines people so much. They're very intense people anyway. That's very Argentine. You do everything to the maximum, and just football's just another one of that. If you go for like a coffee in Argentina, it's not like a casual thing. You're there for like 4 hours having the most intense animated conversation until like 2 a.m. If you go out, the clubs don't really wind up until like 8 a.m. into sunlight. You're going out, you're dancing all night, and then you go to the football, and it's just another thing. You're drinking, smoking, jumping, singing, and giving absolutely everything. So it's just this like give everything you've got to any social activity you do, and football's probably the biggest part of that. And I think that's why you get the scenes that you see in Argentine stadiums of just like pure passion. It's remarkable.
So you were mentioning the similarities between Charlton and San Lorenzo, their stadium, them losing their stadium and then getting it back.
Yeah, that was actually the main reason which I think hooked me into San Lorenzo when I was reading about the different histories of the Argentine clubs. Because what really defines Charlton here in Southeast London is the fact that we lost our stadium in the mid-1980s, and we had the kind of, just because we were just bankrupt as a club, completely mismanaged. And we had the kind of embarrassment of had to play our rivals Crystal Palace and playing at West Ham's ground, and had no stadium, and we nearly lost the club because the support just fell off a cliff. People weren't going, and people just thought it would expire, become like what Wimbledon did before getting replaced by MK Dons. But the fans, not only were they the dedicated core which stood by the club, but not only just committed and protesting and putting pressure on, they're very smart, and they set up our ground is called the Valley. They set up a political party called the Valley Party, which is a one policy party, and ran in local elections and won 15,000 votes. It was absolutely incredible. So they started taking really seriously, and that really got their campaign going. They started getting more investment and eventually got Charlton back to the Valley, to our home ground in 1992. And so our home ground has like an extra significance for us, and it's in all the Charlton songs, and it's very like close to our hearts. Like we never want to leave the Valley after what happened. And then I was reading about San Lorenzo, and the same thing happened to them in the late 1970s. Mismanagement, no money, and then kind of exploited at the time by the Argentine dictatorship, which said, "Oh, we'll use the grounds of the stadium for kind of social development and whatever." They never did. They sold it to a French multinational supermarket. And so San Lorenzo became this homeless club, which Charlton used to be. But San Lorenzo have still never been able to return home, even if their kind of campaigns have been just as strong, if not stronger, for all these years. They've got a kind of a new home now, but it's in a separate neighborhood. It's not the same as Boedo, which is the home neighborhood traditionally of San Lorenzo. And yeah, they're still campaigning. And the main thing the fans have done the last few years is a thing to buy back the territory, the ground of where the stadium was, by selling like a symbolic meter squared to the fans. So I bought that. I've got to own, kind of hypothetically own a meter squared of the ground where San Lorenzo once used to play until 1979. And they've managed to buy up the ground and actually remove that French multinational Carrefour, the supermarket, from that piece of territory. So it's kind of all in place for a return. And finally, this campaign of going on for decades to get San Lorenzo back to Boedo is nearing a completion, but nothing's ever simple in Argentina, and they're still lacking the finance to actually now build the stadium on top of the territory which they've run back. But this incredible fan campaign to like get them home it hooked you in anyway. It's a great story, and it's so similar to what happened to Charlton that it really drew me in. And I think, yeah, that's kind of where it began to a large degree.
It's a proper neighborhood community based club in the way that they function, in the way that they celebrate their wins and everything about it. I was amazed. And
that's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think every club, or most clubs around the world, like to say, "Oh, we represent this neighborhood, and we're the local team," and all that kind of stuff. But it's never as literal. I've never found such a literal kind of manifestation of that as San Lorenzo in this barrio called Boedo. And it's a big club. It's one of the big five in Argentina. So they've got thousands and thousands of supporters all over the country. But there's such an attachment to this neighborhood. And they still do so many kind of social projects in the area. And you walk through the streets and there's red and blue everywhere. There's beautiful murals of like old players and old teams, and then just kind of like just figures associated with the community in San Lorenzo. And you walk through this neighborhood, and even though the football stadium still isn't there, it feels such a San Lorenzo neighborhood. And when I was learning those songs and looking up the lyrics and translating them all those years ago, this Boedo, this home neighborhood, and vamos a volver, we're going to return, it kept coming in every single song. And it was so apparent in everything they were kind of saying and singing as supporters. Yeah, you couldn't help but notice it. They're so closely identified with it. So when they go back, it will be incredible. People will be losing their heads. People will just be in floods of tears. It'll be the most like ridiculous scene of euphoria and passion and emotion that you'll ever see. Hopefully it can happen, and hopefully I can be there. I think I've got a little card, which is because I've bought that meter squared of the kind of turf, that hopefully will give me some kind of rights to maybe get a ticket for that first game back, whenever it will be, but we'll see.
Lovely. And how did you do that? When you were there in Argentina?
I actually did it when I was in London, and I saw the campaign, and I think in Argentine pesos is pretty expensive. It's a big purchase to get like enough ground for a football stadium. Translated to pounds, it was quite pricey. It was probably over £100, but it wasn't crazy. And I thought, I can do this, and I'd love to kind of support. And it's a story I love. And now being part of this kind of club and community, if I can contribute, then brilliant. And I knowing the power of that and the importance of that because of the Charlton story, I felt very invested in it. And so, yeah, I brought that meter squared. You just kind of do it online. You fill out a form. And then you get when I was in Argentina a year later, I picked up my card. It says Socio Refundador, which is kind of, being someone who invested in that, like a partner of that project. And yeah, sometimes that gives you rights to certain tickets for like competitive games, which are very popular. And I guess it's a bit of a badge of honor for the loyal fans as well. And I think, it's a nice thing to have, a nice thing to kind of be a part of, I guess.
Players who you feel didn't get their due while at the club?
To be honest, in Argentina these days, if you've got talent, you'll get your dues and you'll get a platform, because there's not as much talent coming through, and the Argentine Superliga isn't that high on quality. But there's a guy called Chimi Avila who's doing so well in La Liga at the moment, for Osasuna, I think. And he's been linked with like Barcelona and some of the biggest clubs in La Liga. And he wasn't even getting a game for San Lorenzo. It was bizarre. I didn't think he's kind of like quick, fairly skillful, but I didn't really see it leading anywhere. And he kind of left quietly a few years ago. The next thing, he's absolutely smashing in La Liga. So to be fair, he didn't get his dues. And then, I really liked a player called Tino Costa. There's a young guy called Hector Vichalba who did quite well in MLS. But no, to be honest, if you've got the quality, you'll get your chance for the San Lorenzo these days. So I couldn't say there's lots of players who've slipped through the net and haven't got their dues, because you usually get a go.
Young players who you are looking forward to seeing more of?
San Lorenzo at the moment do have one of like the hot properties of Argentine football, a guy called Adolfo Geisch, quite a like German kind of name, and I think he must have that kind of heritage. And he's a big kind of 6'6", 6'7" kind of guy, fair haired, so not the typical kind of small, diminutive, dark haired, skillful Argentine that you used to see. He's a big number 9, but he's got good feet as well. And yeah, he's been fantastic and really stood out. When you have that physical presence, you see this big guy coming on who's only like 18 years old, you think, hang on, this could be something. And he started delivering straight away. He's always chipped in with goals for the first team. He became the kind of first choice striker kind of in the last year or so. Club Brugge were close to buying him. I think Inter were recently linked, and Everton in the UK. So he's that kind of player, like the next to be moved out to one of those kind of mid-level European club. And he did really well for Argentine youth teams as well. They take that very seriously over there. The under-20s get a lot of attention, and Geisch has been scoring a lot of goals for them. So I think people will be seeing that name in a few years. And yeah, I think he'll do quite well in Europe, Adolfo Geisch.
There was another name that you put down, Julian
Palacios. He's a very good little player, more in the traditional Argentine mould. Very short, skillful, number 10, really busy, nice technique. And the supporters really love it when those players come through. They're always just like yearning for this new number 10, I guess, in that kind of Messi mold, but even more traditionally, that kind of Riquelme mold. I know I keep mentioning Riquelme, but he really is like the figure over there. He represents so much of what they love about football, this kind of nonchalant, but very, at the same time, busy player who's just constantly circulating, picking up off midfielders, picking up off defenders, buzzing around everywhere, getting in the pockets. And Palacios looks like he could be that kind of figure for San Lorenzo. But he does look good. There's a long way to go, and it's hard to tell because he's a young boy and he's not physically developed because he's short. But Palacios could be, and his brother plays for the first team as well. They've come up as a little duo. So maybe there'll be players to kind of shine in Argentina the next few years and maybe make the big European switch.
A game that left you elated and a game that has left you disappointed.
A game that left me elated. There's been loads. San Lorenzo, they're called San Lorenzo del Almagro, which is their barrio. And they're called over there sometimes San Lorenzo de los Milagros, which is San Lorenzo of the Miracles, because they're known for having these ridiculous, like blockbuster, last minute winners and dramatic goals, like I was telling you about the way they won the title. And and a lot of drama when they won the Libertadores in 2014. So they're quite good for giving you those mad elation moments, which Charlton never seemed to do for me, apart from one last year when we won the playoffs. But yeah, the big one for me, because I was actually there rather than just streaming it from home, which is kind of me with San Lorenzo 90% of the time. It was on my kind of second trip out there, and it was my first month of my return. And we played it's called the Super Copa, so the winners of the league play the winners of the cup. We played Boca Juniors, and it's not like the Charity Shield in English. They take this game so seriously. It's like a kind of FA Cup final equivalent almost. Okay. It's another piece of silverware. Fans pack out in number. It's a big deal. And made a big trip up, because Argentina is massive. I did it over kind of 2 separate trips, but it's something like probably like an 8-10 hour coach up to the city of Cordoba in the middle of Argentina. And we played Boca Juniors, and Boca are always slight favourites because they're the bigger and usually better club. But they've got this weird mentality against San Lorenzo, and that it happened again that day. Boiling hot night. I was there with a couple of friends. And San Lorenzo were outstanding and won 4-0 in a final. It absolutely blew them away. There's about 20,000 San Lorenzo fans behind the goal. Most of them made the journey from Buenos Aires, an absolute delirium. And generally played great football. There's a couple of like long-range pearlers in there, and all the kind of taunting of Boca, which always happens when we beat them. That was incredible. I've hardly had such a buzz from a game, really. And in terms of disappointment, probably a night in my flat when I used to live in North London, about 3 a.m. we got beaten by Lanús in the Libertadores, the Champions League equivalent. It was on penalties in the end, and we'd won the first leg 2-0. And I think we're heading for a semi-final against River, so another big game against another Argentine club. And it's in your hands. I think we lost our lead within 10 minutes. And yeah, 2-0 down, it stayed level, and we ended up losing on penalties, which is gutting. And there was another one when I was out there, which actually springs to mind, and it had an extra poignancy because we lost to Chapecoense, the Brazilian club, which had the tragic plane accident. So we played them in Brazil, and we lost again as level. It was 1-1 and 0-0. So they won on away goals. So it's 0-0 the second leg in Chapecoense. I was actually in Rio on a separate trip because I was living in Argentina and just sort of nipped across with a friend for a weekend. And I was watching the game, and in the last minute, San Lorenzo have a chance, drops in the box. San Lorenzo have a massive chance to win it and go into the final, and it was missed. It was blasted straight at the keeper's chest, defended absolutely for a Chapecoense get to the final. 3 days later, they're making their flight out for that final, and the plane goes down, and it's when that terrible accident. Was it all but 3 died in the accident? So from this kind of footballing disappointment to this absolute tragedy, it was like a very weird mix of emotions, and football completely flies out the window. It's irrelevant, and the disappointment of what you felt watching the match feels irrelevant. But I kept thinking of that chance at the last minute, and if Angelero, the San Lorenzo defender who missed the chance, blasts it in the back of the net, Chapecoense are never on that plane. The accident's never happening, and it's San Lorenzo going up there. So it's mad when you think of it like that. But that definitely is an all-round kind of disappointment into kind of horror tragedy moment. Well, I think I'll always remember. I think I've actually found a couple of San Lorenzo fans in London because it's so rare. You'd never see a San Lorenzo shirt in the street. You might see the occasional Boca shirt, the occasional River shirt, but San Lorenzo is so niche that there's very few fans outside Argentina. And I was just on a lunch break from work up in North London, and there's a guy just running down the street, headphones in, on his run, and he's wearing a San Lorenzo shirt, and I couldn't believe it. And I thought, if there's a San Lorenzo fan, why don't I know about him? We've got our own tiny community here in London. Like, what's going on here? So I literally ran after him, grabbed him, and like told him to get his earphones off. He's like, well, who is this guy? What the hell are you doing? I was like, "Sos hincha de San Lorenzo," like, and he was like, "What's going on?" I was like, yeah, I'm a San Lorenzo fan. And he's like, looked at me and like, "Are you English?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What?" So he's equally shocked then. He's like, "Why has this guy stopped me in the street to talk about my team over in Argentina?" But then we had a chat just like 1 minute midway through his run, exchanged numbers because we couldn't believe we're both San Lorenzo fans, arranged to go for a pint, and now I still see him a lot, and he's a big part of our kind of little group of, I guess, 5 or 10 San Lorenzo fans here in London. And he was just found from just running through the street wearing the San Lorenzo shirt, and it's such a remarkable thing that I had to just sort of flag him down and stop him. And lucky I did. Yeah. So well, he's a top boy. Yeah, it's nice, and that's a good thing about, I guess, having that finding or ending up with a club that's not on the top shelf of clubs, you know. Because if it's like, it must be nice if you're like the Barcelona fans in London or the Napoli fans, other big clubs, but there's going to be a lot of them, and you might see another fan and go, "Oh, nice, cool." But they're big clubs and big brands with fans all over the world. You see a San Lorenzo shirt, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's remarkable. So it's just it's instant friendship. I have the same when I've been in other countries, in Argentina or Colombia, and I found like the one Charlton fan in the city at that time, and you'll see them in the street and you'll stop and you just start speaking to them, and so it's a connection from nothing, just of a shared football club, because it's such a niche thing, such a specific thing, that it's enough to build a bond from just like that. And yeah, that's the beauty, I guess, of supporting a club like San Lorenzo. And the communities really look after each other, actually. And all over Europe, there's these little, they call them peñas, which is the kind of supporter groups, and they meet up every year in a European city. So all the kind of fans from all over Europe, probably about 100 in total, a few hundred, meet and have a big barbecue, watch a game together. And yeah, the fact that you are these kind of far away fans, so far from like the motherland of Argentina, just brings about a bond and a community. And yeah, it's very cool. Biggest ones would be with Charlton Athletic, because it's my home club, and it's the number one. It's the love of my life, you know. And us winning in the last second at Wembley last year to get promoted from League One was actually the best moment of my life. I wouldn't say that to my wife, but as a concentrated moment of euphoria, that did outdo the wedding. But with San Lorenzo, it was probably that crazy first year of being a fan when we ended up winning the Libertadores, which winning the equivalent of the Champions League is always going to be a massive deal. But because San Lorenzo managed to go its whole history without winning it and had this long wait, everyone in Argentina would always taunt San Lorenzo for being this club that hadn't won this trophy. And it was kind of, I'd just come home from Argentina. I'd fallen in love with the country. I was missing my friends there. I was missing the city. I was at my parents' house watching San Lorenzo at 3 a.m, playing this final. And yeah, they beat Nacional from Paraguay. It's a 2-legged thing. They won 1-0 at San Lorenzo. And you're watching, and I was a little bit drunk, and you're watching absolute euphoria. Everyone in Argentina is crying. All the players are crying. And it's because it's so mixed up in my relationship with Argentina and the time I kind of had there, which I love so much, that I started crying as well. So it's this whole, it's not just the fact that San Lorenzo won this trophy, it's this whole connection with this like faraway land, and just kind of broke down. But it was brilliant. And it's just such a lucky coincidence that in my first year of supporting this club, I've stumbled into easily the best moment in its entire 100-year history. And it's still talked about all the time. So yeah, even though that was one of the times I was watching in England rather than from Argentina, it was a great moment. It's brilliant. Because they're so shocked that you're a kind of Englishman who's into this team, who's another San Lorenzo fan. They're so kind of like happy and shocked and surprised that they kind of want to reward you. They want to give you stuff straight away, and they just throw gifts at you almost. It's bizarre. I was in Morocco for the Club World Cup, as I mentioned earlier, and this guy in a bar just couldn't believe that this guy in broken Spanish is singing San Lorenzo songs with them and is his fan that travelled to watch them. He's like, this is amazing. Just ripped the San Lorenzo hoodie he was wearing off his back and put it on me straight away. Like, this is yours. You have to take it. And he's left in like a cold night with just a t-shirt because he's giving me his hoodie. I was in a taxi in Argentina in like the early days. Same sort of thing. It turns out the taxi driver's a massive San Lorenzo fan. And he couldn't believe that this young English guy was taking such an interest in his club and was going to games and supporting them. Opens the glove compartment and gives me this little, this mini flag. And yeah, you get lots of things like that. And there's a really nice friend called Laura in Argentina sorted out getting a signed shirt for me, which is nice. But her brother organised it, and her brother's a massive Huracan fan of the biggest rival. So the poor guy had to arrange a shirt to go to San Lorenzo's training ground, biggest rival, all these players he hates, so he could sign a San Lorenzo shirt, which he hates, and get it to me as a kind of leaving present from like my main time in Argentina. So yeah, I'm lucky to have some very good mementos here actually.
Fair bit of time, 2013.
Yeah, 7 years now.
Yeah, that's quite a journey, man. What has it meant to you?
It means everything to me without sounding too cliche. It's the best decision I ever made. People who live in other cities often talk about the great experience and that connection you get with new people, but supporting a football club and going to games makes that connection so profound because you're part of this kind of more niche community. You're not just like with the other expats in the city. You're part of this new community, new family. Somewhere like football in Argentina, which has lived so passionately and with so much kind of like culture and folklore around it, it's an amazing thing to be involved in that most other people, most foreigners in the city wouldn't be able to get and wouldn't ever experience. So yeah, being part of that was the best decision I kind of ever made. And yeah, I've got all my closest Argentine friends are San Lorenzo supporters. I've met them through the club, whether they live there or live here. It helped me learn Spanish because I'm listening to commentators and learning the words from the songs. I now speak kind of more or less fluent Spanish, and my wife's Colombian, and we speak Spanish together, and we met in Argentina in the days. I think it was the day I remember almost the best weekend of my life. I saw San Lorenzo win on Thursday night, and on an away cup game, I travelled on my own down to like the ground of Lanús, a bit of a dangerous part of town, and watched a great win there in the cup. I met Lily the next night, my Colombian wife, and I remember singing her like San Lorenzo songs and trying to get her interested in all that. Went to another away game that weekend for San Lorenzo. We beat Arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of days later, we were kind of like together, and we've now been to games together and whatever. So it's all like the San Lorenzo connection is very much tied in with this kind of best year of my life, which is 2016, when I went to games home and away, traveled all over. Went to Chile as well, watching San Lorenzo in the kind of Europa League equivalent over there for an away game, which is so fun. So yeah, you experience so much. Football is the best window you can ever have to other cultures, other histories, other languages, and then football clubs and support. You just learn even more and meet more people, and it's for all those reasons. It's kind of committing, not consciously committing to the club. So I'd say it kind of sucked me in. Being involved with them is kind of the best thing I've ever done in my life. It's been great.
It's so great because you can very easily start a conversation have something so relatable, and I wonder sometimes about, in this time right now, and I'm sure London is having a lot of these protests, something like this, football especially, it's such a great instrument to bring people together. You don't realize how important it is for such a, I mean, it's just a game, but how important it is, the role that it plays in our lives. And also how, sometimes people get judged for being a fan. I mean, how can you be a fan? You don't have the local context and things like that. But that's why the questions that I kind of ask about games that you felt elated about and disappointed about, chances are that some local person will feel exactly the same way about those games like you did. It doesn't matter that you were, so many miles apart, but in those moments people will really understand what it means to be a faraway fan. It's not different. I mean, it would be amazing to go for the local games, but it's in many ways those moments kind of bring you together, and that's something so relatable across all sort of fans.
Absolutely, you're completely right. It's very well put. And yeah, because I guess when I'm going to Charlton here, you are seeing people like you. They're from the same areas. You're seeing your family and stuff, and that's part of what's very special about it. I love that it represents what you're about. But the thing of being a far away fan and having this kind of second passion, or it might be a primary passion for a lot of people, is going across whole time zones and whole languages. And you're right, why would I have anything in common with someone in like the outskirts of Buenos Aires at like, it's like hot summer's day for them, it's a cold evening in the UK here, and yet we've just lost 1-0 to some crap club like Aldo Civi, and we're both there sitting in misery, and like it's so weird. But and we both kind of vent on Twitter together at the same time. Then you're following each other, and you've built this connection from nothing, which you would have no reason or right to. And like you say, when the world's as it is, those little unifying things are amazing. And football support is the ultimate in that, I think, for those connections. So yeah, no, it's completely right, everything you said.
Will, I just want to say thank you for coming on to the pod. It's been great. And the way you spoke about the club and, the club itself, it's given me such a feeling about wanting to someday go to Argentina and just experience that.
You should. If anyone interested in football support and football culture, if you like, there's not a better city in the world than Buenos Aires in Argentina to kind of experience that. And yeah, I'm very thankful that I've been able to. And yeah, thanks for a fantastic chat. It's always a pleasure to talk about it. I know I get quite overexcited and ramble on, so hopefully I haven't been too tedious with it. But no, lovely conversation, mate.
No. Yeah, I mean, that's what really makes it, because the football. Yeah, I mean, you can talk about that, but it's that fan culture and these moments that I really kind of enjoy talking about.
Yeah, for me that's more interesting than stats and goals, assists, and whatever points per game averages to work out seasons and whatever. They're the kind of inconsequential parts of football for me. It's like, without sounding cliche, it's the off the pitch stuff and the human connections and the histories and the communities which really kind of bring it to life and give it that extra kind of special level. And yeah, and following a team from far away that's part of a completely kind of alien, different culture is a nice way to experience all that and discover that. So yeah, the premise of the podcast is great, and it's a lovely thing to dig into with you.
Cool, man. Thanks so much again, Will.
Cool. Good stuff, Sean. Nice to speak to you, mate. Take care.
Take care.
See you later.